The second the divorce papers were signed, I quietly shut down every credit card linked to my name. 15 in total. At that exact moment, my ex was proudly planning a $75,000 engagement celebration, convinced everything was under control. I didn't shout or beg. I waited. And when I finally spoke just one calm sentence, the smiles vanished, the room went still, and the truth crashed down on everyone watching. Before I tell you how one silent tap unraveled a life he thought he had already replaced, do something small for me. Stay with my story till the end, and let me know where you're listening from. Stories like this travel further when people speak up. The courthouse steps were slick with melting snow, and the folder in my hand still felt warm, as if the paper inside had absorbed 20 years of my body heat. The decree was thin, too thin for the weight it carried. 20 years of meals cooked, bills tracked, excuses swallowed, dreams postponed, all reduced to a few stamped pages. I had rushed out that morning without thinking, wearing a jacket better suited for autumn. My hand shook, not from fear, but from something loosening inside me. The kind of tremor you feel when pressure finally releases. He didn't wait. As soon as the clerk said we were done, he turned sharply and walked faster than me. He's already out. No goodbye. No pause. No attempt at dignity. Through the tinted window of the car, I caught a glimpse of soft pink fabric and a woman checking her reflection in the mirror. She laughed at something he said, her head tilting in that practiced way. I felt light. For the first time in 2 decades, I wasn't being left behind. I was being released. I stood there for a second longer, breathing in the sharp air, then pulled out my phone. The banking app opened with my fingerprint. I didn't hesitate. I didn't need to think. Years ago, when I still believed trust was enough, he told me his business needed flexibility. Cash flow problems, he said. Temporary. He asked me to apply for a primary credit account in my name and issue supplementary cards for him. And because he always needed help, because his family always needed help, I didn't stop there. 15 cards. 1 for him. 1 for his sister. Several for relatives. A few for friends who always seemed short on cash but long on opinions. I told myself it was easier that way, that I was supporting the family, that it was temporary. I was wrong. The list loaded on my screen. 15 numbers. All marked active. My eyes stopped on one card in particular, the one he used most. The last 4 digits were easy to remember. He always said they brought him luck. Last month, he used that very card to buy a luxury handbag that cost more than I had spent on myself in 5 years. I pressed the number. Cancel. The app asked for confirmation. I confirmed. A notification appeared immediately. Supplementary card successfully deactivated. This card can no longer be used. Something inside my chest unclenched. I didn't stop. One by one, I canceled them all. No speeches. No messages. No warnings. Just 15 clean decisions. My phone buzzed repeatedly as confirmations stacked up. The sound was soft, but to me it felt thunderous. With every vibration, a little more weight lifted. Just as the last card disappeared from the list, my phone chimed again, this time with a voice message. It was my best friend, Leora. Her voice came through bright and breathless. Ria, listen. One of my boutique clients works as an event coordinator at a luxury hotel. She just called me. She saw your ex. He's booking an engagement party. Big one. She said he kept insisting it had to be extravagant. Around $75,000. I smiled. The timing was almost poetic. While he sat in a velvet chair, promising a future he couldn't afford, I had quietly turned off the tap. I sent Leora a short reply. I know. And today he won't even manage the deposit. I slipped the phone back into my coat pocket, tucked the folder into my bag, and started walking home. For years, I had passed this courthouse with a knot in my stomach, always wondering what would happen if the marriage finally collapsed. Now that it had, the world felt strangely calm. Halfway home, I stopped at a street cart selling roasted nuts. I bought a small bag, warming my hands around it as I walked. The heat seeped into my palms, grounding me. From now on, I lived for myself. I had barely set my bag down at home when the pounding started. Not a knock. A barrage. The door shook under the force, as if someone was determined to break it down. Then came the voice, sharp, familiar, already furious. Open the door, Ria. Don't pretend you're not inside. I closed my eyes once, slowly. His sister. I set the groceries down, washed my hands, and walked toward the door without rushing. I didn't open it immediately. Who is it? I called calmly. If you have something to say it properly. Don't play games, she snapped. Open this door right now. My brother is being humiliated at a hotel because of you. I opened the door. She barged in before I could say another word, heels clicking aggressively against my floor. She wore a loud floral dress, makeup thick, confidence borrowed. In her hand was a designer handbag I recognized instantly, one purchased with my credit line. She tossed it onto my sofa like she owned the place. Have you completely lost your mind? She demanded. All the cards stopped working. Every single one. The hotel staff looked at my brother like he was begging. Do you have any idea what you've done? I folded my arms. Yes, I canceled them. Her mouth fell open. You what? She laughed incredulously. Those cards have been used for years. By us. By family. You can't just... I can, I interrupted. And I did. Her face twisted. I was about to buy shoes this week. And now you pull the stunt? Who do you think you are? I walked past her, opened a drawer, and placed a folder on the table between us. Read. She glanced at the documents, confusion flickering across her face. The primary account holder is me, I said calmly. Those cards exist only because I allowed them to. She scoffed. My brother said he changed that long ago. I unlocked my phone again and held it out. Show me proof. She had none. The silence that followed wasn't loud, but it was heavy. Her tone shifted, softer but sharper underneath. You've been married 20 years. How can you be so heartless? He's starting a new life. I looked at her steadily. And who paid for it? She had no answer. Her hand moved toward a glass on the table. I pointed to the door. Try anything and the police decide who's in the wrong. She froze. A moment later, she grabbed her bag and hissed. You'll regret this. Our mother will deal with you. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled. I stood there, heart steady. I knew what was coming next. And this time I wasn't afraid. I didn't clean up after she left. The door still bore the faint dent from her kick, the handbag imprint still visible on the sofa cushion where she'd thrown it like a challenge. I let it stay. I wanted to remember the moment I stopped backing away. I poured myself a glass of water and took a slow sip. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. For 20 years, every raised voice in that family had turned my spine soft. Every accusation made me scramble to explain myself, apologize, fix things that were never broken on my side. But now there was only clarity. I knew she wasn't bluffing. Her mother would come. I didn't rush to prepare. I didn't rehearse arguments in my head the way I used to. Instead, I opened the drawer in my study and took out another folder, the one I had never dared to use before. Inside were receipts, handwritten ledgers, screenshots, bank slips, transaction histories. Years of quiet documentation I'd kept without fully admitting why. At the time, I told myself it was just being organized. Now I understood it was instinct. I set the folder neatly on the dining table and fed my old gray cat, Ash. He emerged cautiously from under the sofa, sniffed the air, then rubbed against my leg. I crouched and scratched behind his ears. It's just us now, I murmured. And that's enough. Less than half an hour later, the knock came again. This one was measured, deliberate. each tap spaced evenly as if rehearsed. I didn't need to look through the peephole. "Ria," came the voice, syrupy and controlled. "Open the door." "It's me." I unlocked it and stepped back. She entered as if she still owned the place. My former mother-in-law wore the dark green coat I'd bought her 2 winters ago, the one she'd praised endlessly while telling neighbors her son was so generous. Mud from her shoes streaked across my freshly mopped floor, but she didn't pause or apologize. She walked straight to the living room, set a heavy cloth bag on the table with a thud, and sat in my seat. Apples rolled out of the bag and scattered across the floor. "Come," she said, patting the sofa. "Sit. We need to talk like civilized people." I pulled a chair over and sat opposite her. She sighed deeply, theatrically, as if she carried the weight of the world. "Your sister-in-law told me what happened. Ria, I never imagined you'd act this way. Canceling everything without warning. My son couldn't even pay a deposit today. He had to borrow money just to get home." I said nothing. She mistook my silence for submission. "Yes, he made mistakes," she continued. "But after 20 years together, there must be some affection left. Do you really want to ruin his reputation? He's a businessman. People talk." I leaned forward slightly. "Did people talk when he used my credit to buy gifts for another woman?" Her eyes flickered. "You're focusing on the past," she snapped. "Men stray. It happens, especially when a marriage is incomplete." I felt something snap, not loudly, not dramatically, just clean and final. Incomplete because I didn't give him a child. I asked quietly. She didn't deny it. Instead, she straightened her back. "That girl is young. If she gives him a healthy son, it will be a blessing for our family. You should be understanding." I stood up. I went to the study and returned with the folder. I placed it on the table and opened it deliberately. "Look," I said, pointing to the first page. "Last winter, I had a fever over 102 degrees. I asked your son to buy medicine. He said he was busy. That same night, he transferred money to his girlfriend for clothes." She looked away. I flipped another page. "Mother's Day. I bought him a sweater. He said it was too expensive. That same day, he bought her jewelry worth nearly 10 times as much." Her fingers tightened on the edge of the sofa. "And this," I continued, pulling out the ledger. "The business. My family's initial investment. My unpaid labor. And the money he siphoned off. Over $75,000. Her face drained of color. "That money," I said evenly, "belongs to me as much as it does to him." She slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. You are still my daughter-in-law. You owe this family respect. Reactivate the cards." I laughed. The sound startled even me. "Respect." I echoed. "You took my savings, my time, my silence, and now you want access to my credit again." Her voice rose. "If something happens to my son because of this stress, you'll be responsible." I leaned closer. "Then let the police decide who's responsible. Me for canceling my own cards? Or you for trespassing and intimidation?" Her eyes darted toward the door. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her posture. Suddenly, she slid off the sofa and dropped to the floor, slapping her knees and wailing loudly. "Look at my fate. Raised children alone, only to be humiliated by my daughter-in-law. Neighbors, come see how I'm treated." I walked to the door and opened it wider. "Please," I said calmly, "come see." The crying stopped abruptly. She scrambled to her feet, eyes blazing. "You've changed." "Yes," I replied. "I have." She shoved past me, knocking my shoulder as she left, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I locked it slowly. My legs trembled, but only after she was gone. I picked up the fallen apples, rinsed them, and placed them in a bowl. Ash followed me into the kitchen, tail high. "I'm okay," I told him and meant it. My phone buzzed. A message from Leora, tomorrow morning. Lawyer confirmed. I'm coming with you. I smiled. I wasn't alone anymore. And somewhere across town, a man who thought he'd already won was beginning to realize something vital had slipped through his fingers. Something he couldn't swipe, charm, or threaten back into place. And this was only the beginning. That night, sleep came in fragments. Every time I closed my eyes, memory surfaced. Not the dramatic ones, but the small humiliations I had trained myself to ignore. The way he'd sigh loudly if dinner wasn't ready exactly when he wanted. How his sister would borrow money without asking and never return it. How his mother would rearrange my kitchen drawers and then criticize me for not being organized. I lay awake listening to the soft rhythm of Ash's breathing beside me, his warm weight pressed against my leg. The house felt different now, quiet but not lonely. For the first time, the silence wasn't waiting to accuse me of something. Just before dawn, I got up, brewed coffee, and opened the folder again. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. I just needed to remind myself that I hadn't imagined any of it. At 9 sharp, Leora arrived. She didn't knock timidly. She rang the bell once and stood there with her arms crossed, daring anyone inside to argue with her presence. The moment I opened the door, she pulled me into a tight hug. "I swear," she muttered, "if I'd been here yesterday, I would have chased them both out myself." I laughed, the tension loosening in my chest. We drove across town together, the city waking up around us. Cafes opening, delivery trucks idling, people heading to work with the same routines they'd followed for years. I realized something as we sat in traffic. Life hadn't stopped just because my marriage had ended. The world hadn't collapsed. It had simply continued. The lawyer's office was modest but bright, tucked above a bakery that smelled faintly of bread and cinnamon. Inside, framed certificates lined the walls, and a tall man with calm eyes stood as we entered. He listened without interrupting. I laid everything out, the cards, the transfers, the business ledger, the threats, the harassment. Leora handed him screenshots she'd already organized, labeled by date and amount. When I finished, my throat felt dry. The lawyer leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "You did the right thing," he said simply. Those words hit harder than I expected. He explained the steps carefully. The diverted funds were marital assets. The unauthorized transfers were actionable. The threats? Recorded and usable. He would file for financial disclosure, request bank records, and prepare a formal claim. They will push back, he warned, especially if they believe intimidation still works. "It doesn't," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. When we left the office, the sky had cleared completely. Sunlight reflected off the windows of nearby buildings, sharp and clean. I thought that would be the end of it for the day. I was wrong. By the time I got home, my phone had exploded with missed calls. Unknown numbers. Messages piling up faster than I could open them. I ignored them all. Then a notification appeared from a social media app, one rarely used. Friend request, Lena C. Her profile photo showed a woman in heavy makeup, head tilted just so, a diamond necklace catching the light. I didn't need to ask who she was. I accepted. The messages came immediately. Photos first. A glittering hotel ballroom. A white dress laid out on a bed. A close-up of a ring resting on manicured fingers. Then text. He told me everything. "You're just bitter you couldn't keep him. This is our future now." I stared at the screen, oddly detached. When I replied, I kept it simple. "Who's paying for it?" There was a pause longer than before. "Then he is. Obviously." I sent one screenshot, a canceled card notification. Another, a bank statement showing the transfers. A third, his frantic voicemail from earlier, begging the bank for answers. "You might want to ask him again," I typed. Before making plans that depend on my name. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then the insults started. Long strings of them. Accusations. Claims that I was lying, obsessed, trying to crawl back into his life. I didn't argue. I screenshotted everything. When she finally blocked me, I set the phone down and exhaled. Ash jumped onto the table, sat squarely on my folder, and stared at me as if guarding it. "Good job," I told him. That evening, another knock came. This time I didn't open the door. My ex-husband's voice filtered through the wood, lower, strained. "Ria, we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "You can't just destroy my life like this," he snapped. "You know how this looks." I laughed softly. "You booked a celebration you couldn't afford. You used money that wasn't yours. And now you're embarrassed. That's not destruction. That's exposure." His breathing grew heavier. "If you don't fix this, I'll make sure you regret it." I hit record. "Go on," I said. Silence. Then footsteps retreating down the hallway. I saved the audio file and uploaded it to the cloud. Later that night, Leora called. "He tried to pay the hotel deposit again," she said. "Still declined." I smiled into the dark. Somewhere, the illusion he'd been living in was cracking. Slowly, quietly, but beyond repair. And the more he struggled to hold it together, the clearer it became. This story was no longer about what he'd taken from me. It was about what I was no longer willing to give. The days that followed moved with an unsettling calm, the kind that comes before a storm fully commits to breaking. On the surface, my life looked almost ordinary again. I woke early, made coffee, fed Ash, and sat at the small dining table reviewing documents while sunlight crept across the floor. But beneath that routine, something was shifting, slowly, deliberately. The lawyer called on the third morning. "I filed the request," he said. "The court order for financial disclosure should come through within days. Once we have the bank records, there won't be much room for denial." I thanked him and hung up, my fingers lingering on the phone longer than necessary. For years, I had waited for someone else to act. My husband, his family, even fate. Now, the movement was coming from me, and it felt strange but powerful. That afternoon, I took Leora up on her offer and stopped by the organic market her friend owned. I hadn't worked outside the home in years. Walking through the narrow aisles, inhaling the clean scent of herbs and fruit, I felt something loosen in my chest. The owner was warm and direct, showing me how she managed inventory, how she tracked margins, how she dealt with suppliers who tried to undercut quality. "You already know this," she said, watching me review a ledger. "You've been doing it all along, just for someone else." I smiled, realizing how true that was. When I got home, Ash greeted me like I'd been gone for weeks. I bent down, burying my face in his fur, and laughed softly. For the first time since the divorce, I allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't revolve around damage control. The illusion didn't last long. That evening, my phone rang again. His name lit up the screen. I answered, but not before starting the recorder. His tone was different this time. Controlled. Almost gentle. "Ria," he said, "I've been thinking. Maybe we both said things we shouldn't have. Maybe this doesn't need to go further." I leaned back against the counter. "You're right," I said calmly. "It doesn't. You can return what you took, and we can let the lawyers finish their work." A pause. "That money," he said carefully, "was invested back into the business. You know how things fluctuate." "You transferred it into your personal account," I replied, "and then spent it." "You don't understand," he snapped, irritation slipping through. "If you keep pushing this, you'll ruin me. The party, the clients, everything." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Those are consequences," I said, "not my responsibility." His voice dropped. "You think you're strong now because you've got papers and a lawyer. Don't forget who I am." "I haven't," I said softly. I finally remembered who I am. He hung up without another word. I saved the file, labeled it clearly, and backed it up twice. Later that night, Leora messaged me again. "He's scrambling," she wrote. "I heard he's been borrowing from friends. The hotel is pressing him." I stared at the message, imagining him pacing, rehearsing lies, trying to keep the image intact. For so long, I had been the one smoothing things over, hiding cracks from the outside world. Without me, everything was unraveling faster than he could patch it. 2 days later, the lawyer called again. The order came through, he said. The bank confirmed the transfers. We also found additional withdrawals, cash advances. There's more than we initially thought. My stomach tightened. How much? 35,000 went toward personal expenses unrelated to the business, gambling establishments among them. I closed my eyes. Gambling. That explained the constant liquidity problems, the sudden mood swings, the desperation masked as confidence. Next steps. I asked. We file immediately. And Ria, be prepared. When people realize the evidence is airtight, they sometimes try alternate tactics. I knew what he meant. That night, as if on cue, the doorbell rang again. I didn't open it. His mother's voice drifted through the hallway, shrill and insistent. Ria, open this door. We can still fix this. I stayed where I was, seated at the table, ash curled at my feet. She knocked again. Harder. You think you've won, she shouted. You think this makes you powerful. I stood and walked to the door, but I didn't unlock it. No, I said through the wood. I think this makes me done. There was a long silence, then footsteps retreating. I returned to the table, hand steady, and realized something important. Every attempt to intimidate me was weaker than the last. They were running out of leverage. The engagement party date crept closer, whispers spreading through shared circles. People talked. Invitations were delayed. Deposits questioned. The image he'd tried to build was cracking under its own weight. And somewhere inside that chaos, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because I no longer feared how it would end. I looked at the stack of documents, the neatly labeled recordings, the quiet house around me. Whatever came next, I was ready. And he still had no idea just how exposed he was about to become. The night before everything tipped beyond repair, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind was too clear. For the first time in years, there was no fog of doubt, no constant second-guessing of my own instincts. I lay awake, listening to the quiet rhythm of the apartment, Ash's steady breathing at my side, and replayed the past not with pain but with precision. Every dismissed concern, every "you're overthinking," every moment I swallowed discomfort to keep the peace. Peace, I finally understood, had never been peace at all. It had been silence bought at my expense. By morning, the lawyer's message was already waiting. We have the complete statement trail. Gambling debts, personal transfers, third-party accounts. It's all documented. I'll prepare the formal filing today. I stared at the screen, absorbing the words slowly. Complete. Documented. Irrefutable. This was no longer about emotions or accusations. It was about facts. I replied with a simple acknowledgement and got up to start the day. I went to the market early, wanting the distraction. The owner greeted me with a knowing look, handing me a crate of apples and pointing me toward the back room. As I worked, sorting produce and checking invoices, I felt grounded, useful, capable. These were things I'd always been, even when no one acknowledged them. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't him. It was the woman. I recognized the name instantly. I'd seen it in messages, in bank statements, and half-hidden notifications he never bothered to fully erase. She didn't bother with pleasantries. I know you've been talking to people, the message read. I don't appreciate being dragged into your bitterness. I exhaled slowly before responding. I haven't dragged you into anything, I typed. You walked into it. Seconds passed. Then dots appeared. He told me everything was settled, she wrote. That you were exaggerating. That you were trying to sabotage us because you couldn't move on. I felt a strange calm wash over me. He told you that because it benefits him, I replied. Just like he told me his debts were temporary. Just like he told both of us different versions of the truth. There was a longer pause this time. Finally, is there proof? I didn't hesitate. I sent one screenshot. Just one. A bank transfer clearly labeled, dated undeniable. Another pause. Longer. Then, he said that money was from investments. I leaned against the counter, fingers steady as I typed. Ask him why the investment account matches the casino ledger. Ask him why the hotel deposit still isn't paid. Ask him why the lawyer has records he didn't expect anyone to see. The dots vanished. She didn't reply again. That silence told me everything. When I got home that evening, the apartment felt different. Not emptier, but lighter. I fed Ash, poured myself a glass of water, and opened the folder I'd been carefully building for weeks. Each document was labeled. Each audio file dated and backed up. There was a quiet satisfaction in the order of it all. At 7:43 p.m., my phone rang. His name. I answered without hesitation. "What did you tell her?" he demanded, skipping any attempt at civility. "The truth," I said. "You should try it sometime." "You had no right," he snapped. "You're poisoning everything." "No," I replied evenly. "I stopped cleaning up your mess." There was heavy breathing on the other end. "You think this ends well for you," he said. "People will talk. You'll be labeled difficult, bitter." I almost laughed. "They already talked," I said. While I stayed quiet. Now they're just hearing the full story. His voice dropped, turning sharp. "If you don't back off, I'll make this ugly." I glanced at the recorder icon, blinking steadily. "It's already ugly," I said. "You just didn't think it would be visible." Silence. Then a low, controlled tone. "What do you want?" I didn't answer immediately. I let the question hang. "I want what's mine," I said finally. "And I want you to stop pretending you're entitled to anything else." "You'll ruin me," he muttered. I closed my eyes. "You did that yourself." I ended the call. That night I dreamed, not of him, not of the past, but of walking through a door that opened easily without resistance. The next morning, the lawyer called again. "He's been notified," he said. "Officially. He has a limited window to respond before we escalate." "Will he?" I asked. The lawyer paused. People like him usually try one last move. He was right. 2 days later, he showed up. I saw his car from the window and didn't move. I let him knock. Once. Twice. 3 times. Finally, I opened the door, but stayed firmly inside the frame. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. The confidence he used to wear like armor was cracked, slipping. "We need to talk," he said. "I don't," I replied. "Please," he added, lowering his voice. "Not like this." I studied his face, searching for sincerity. What I found instead was calculation, fear, not remorse. "You had years to talk," I said. "You chose silence when it suited you." "I made mistakes," he said quickly. "I'll admit that. But this is overkill." "No," I said calmly. "This is accountability." He ran a hand through his hair. "What if I pay part of it back? We can call it even." I shook my head. "You don't get to negotiate away consequences." His eyes hardened. "You're enjoying this." I met his gaze. "I'm enjoying not being powerless." For a moment, he looked like he might say something else, something real. Instead, he straightened. "You think you've won," he said coldly. "But this isn't over." I stepped back and closed the door gently. When the lock clicked, my hands didn't shake. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, listening to his footsteps fade away. Later that afternoon, the lawyer forwarded me a message. "He's panicking. Tried to delay. It won't work." I smiled faintly. The engagement party was 3 days away. Everything he'd built on borrowed money, borrowed stories, borrowed trust was about to face the light. And this time, there would be no one left to cover for him. I sat down beside Ash, scratching behind his ears, and whispered softly, almost. He looked up at me, tail thumping once against the floor. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for things to happen to me. I was watching them fall into place. The day before the engagement party, arrived wrapped in false calm. The city moved as usual, traffic, conversations, laughter spilling out of cafes. But underneath it all, something was tightening. I felt it in my chest, not as anxiety, but as pressure before a storm finally breaks. I went to work early that morning, needing routine to anchor me. The market smelled of fresh herbs and citrus. I checked inventory, updated ledgers, and greeted regular customers with the same steady smile I'd learned to wear long before all of this. To anyone watching, I was just another woman doing her job. No one could see the countdown ticking quietly in my head. By mid-morning, my phone vibrated again. A message from my lawyer. He's trying to transfer assets. Too late. Court freeze is in motion. I reread the sentence twice, then once more, letting the meaning sink in. The safety net he'd relied on, money shuffled quietly, debts hidden, accounts blurred, was finally gone. I typed back a simple response. Understood. That was all that needed to be said. Around noon, Zuri stopped by the market. She leaned against the counter, pretending to browse apples while watching my face. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I nodded, clear-headed. She smiled, relieved. "That's better than okay." We stepped outside for a moment, the winter sun pale but steady above us. She handed me a coffee and lowered her voice. The hotel manager confirmed everything. "He's nervous. Not about you, about him. Half the vendors are already uneasy because payments are late." I took a slow sip. "Good." Zuri raised an eyebrow. "You're calm. That scares me more than if you were angry." I chuckled softly. "Anger burns too fast. This lasts." She studied me for a second, then squeezed my arm. "Tomorrow you won't be alone." I watched her walk away, feeling gratitude settle deep in my chest. For years, I'd been surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. Now, with fewer people, I felt supported in a way I never had before. That evening, when I returned home, the apartment was quiet except for ash padding across the floor. I fed him, then sat at the table where the evidence folder lay open, exactly where I'd left it. I went through everything again. Bank statements, transfer records, screenshots, audio files, hotel contracts, casino ledgers. Every piece fit together, like a puzzle that told a single, undeniable story. I wasn't guessing anymore. I wasn't assuming. I knew. At 9:18 p.m., my phone rang again. His name. I didn't answer. The phone rang again. Then again. Finally, a message came through. "Let's talk before tomorrow. This doesn't need to happen." I stared at the words, then locked the screen and set the phone face down. He was afraid. Not of losing me. Not of what he'd done. Afraid of being exposed. That distinction mattered. I slept deeply that night. No dreams, no restlessness. Just quiet. The morning of the party arrived cold and bright. I woke before the alarm, showered, dressed simply, and ate breakfast slowly. Ash watched me from the floor, tail flicking lazily. "You'll be fine," I told him softly, though the words were meant for myself too. At 10, Zuri picked me up. She was unusually quiet as we drove, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready longer than I realized," I said. We parked near the hotel just after 11. The building loomed ahead, polished glass reflecting a version of reality he wanted the world to believe. Luxury, success, control. Inside, staff hurried back and forth. Music tested through speakers. Floral arrangements were adjusted. Everything looked perfect on the surface. A staff member approached us, discreet and professional, handing me a temporary pass. "Please follow me," she said. She led us through a side corridor, away from the main entrance, into a quiet holding room behind the banquet hall. From there, I could hear laughter, glasses clinking, the low hum of anticipation. The party was already underway. I set my bag down, fingers brushing the edge of the folder inside. My heart was steady, my breathing even. At exactly 12:07, my phone buzzed again. A single message from him. Please. I deleted it. Minutes passed slowly. Then the music shifted. Through the door, I heard the MC's voice rise above the chatter. Warm, practiced, celebratory. The crowd quieted. Applause followed. The moment was approaching. Zuri leaned close. Once you step out, there's no rewinding. I nodded. I know. The staff member returned, opening the door slightly. Now, she whispered. I stood. The corridor felt longer than it had before. With each step, I felt years of silence peeling away. The door opened, and the banquet hall came into view. Rows of tables, guests dressed in their finest, lights soft and flattering. And there he was, standing at the center, smiling, confident, arm around her waist. The picture of a man who believed he had one. I walked forward calmly, the murmur of voices rising as heads turned. He saw me. The color drained from his face. The MC hesitated, confused, microphone still raised. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I stopped a few steps from the stage. Before this continues, I said clearly, my voice carrying without strain, there's something everyone here deserves to know. A ripple moved through the room. Whispers. Gasps. He opened his mouth. This isn't the place. It's exactly the place, I replied. I reached into my bag and took out the first document. This event, I said, holding it up, was booked with money that wasn't his to spend. Her grip on his arm tightened. What are you talking about? She asked, voice trembling. I didn't look at her yet. Marital funds, I continued. Diverted without consent. Documented. I laid the papers out methodically, each one placed with care. This party, I said, hasn't been fully paid for. The deposits are incomplete. The debts behind it are extensive. The room erupted into murmurs. He tried to interrupt, stepping forward. She's lying. I pressed a button. His voice filled the room. Threatening. Cold. Recorded weeks earlier. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Her hand dropped from his arm. Faces in the crowd shifted, from curiosity to discomfort to recognition. I looked at him then, really looked. You built this on deception, I said quietly. Tonight it collapses. The MC stepped back, stunned. The hotel manager appeared at the side of the stage, papers in hand. Sir, he said to him firmly, we'll need to discuss immediate settlement. He swayed slightly, as if the floor itself had betrayed him. She stared at him, tears streaking down her face. You said you were free. You said everything was handled. He couldn't answer. One by one, guests began to stand. Conversations hushed. Some shook their heads. Others avoided eye contact entirely. Deals were being reconsidered. Reputations reevaluated. I turned away before it fully unraveled. I didn't need to watch the rest. Outside, the air felt colder, but cleaner. Zuri let out a long breath she'd been holding for hours. You did it. No, I said softly. I finished it. Behind us, the music stopped. And for the first time in years, so did the noise in my head. What came next would be legal, procedural, predictable. But that moment, the moment truth walked into a room built on lies, was already over. And it had changed everything. The banquet hall emptied faster than I expected. What had begun as a glittering performance unraveled into awkward silence, then scattered movement, chairs scraping, voices dropping, eyes refusing to meet one another. People left in clusters, then pairs, then alone. No applause, no music, no grand ending. Just confusion, embarrassment, and the unmistakable collapse of a carefully staged lie. I stood outside the hotel for a moment, breathing in the cold air, letting it ground me. Behind me, inside those glass walls, his world was imploding. In front of me, my life was finally moving forward. Zuri squeezed my hand. You okay? I nodded. I feel light. She smiled. That's what freedom feels like. We didn't stay to watch the aftermath. I didn't need to. The damage was done, not because I had raised my voice, but because I had brought receipts, truth, and timing. Lies can survive anger. They can't survive proof. We drove away, quietly. The city lights blurred past the window, and for the first time in years, my mind wasn't racing ahead or replaying the past. It was simply still. The next morning, my phone exploded. Missed calls, messages, voicemails, unknown numbers. Some were from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Others were from people I barely recognized, former business contacts, acquaintances, even distant friends of friends. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I made coffee, fed Ash, and sat by the window as sunlight filled the room. At 9:42 a.m., my lawyer called. "You did exactly what you needed to do," he said calmly. "And now things will move very quickly." He explained that several guests who had attended the party were also business partners, investors, or clients. The moment doubts were raised publicly, contracts became vulnerable. Trust, once cracked, never fully heals. "He's already defaulting," the lawyer continued. "Multiple obligations. The court execution order will accelerate." I closed my eyes for a moment. Not out of relief. Out of finality. "Good," said. That afternoon, Zuri came over with takeout and a bottle of wine we never opened. We sat on the floor, backs against the couch, Ash curled between us. "People are talking," she said. "Everywhere." I figured they would. Some are shocked. Some are pretending they always knew. Some are blaming you. I laughed quietly. "Of course they are." She tilted her head. "Does it bother you?" I thought about it honestly before answering. "No," I said, "because the ones blaming me would have blamed me no matter what. And the ones who matter, they saw the truth." That night, a single message came through from him. Not angry, not threatening, just desperate. "You ruined me." I stared the words for a long time. Then I typed back. "No, I stopped protecting you." I blocked the number. The days that followed were relentless but strangely calm. Court notices arrived. Enforcement actions followed. Accounts were frozen. Assets were listed. His car, once a symbol of status, was seized. The supply business officially closed its doors after creditors filed claims he couldn't settle. I learned all of this secondhand, through my lawyer or Zuri. I never went looking. I didn't need to. The truth has momentum once it's released. 2 weeks later, I was called into court, not for confrontation, but for confirmation. The judge reviewed the evidence with a detached expression, asking clarifying questions, flipping through pages marked with dates, signatures, numbers. When it was over, the ruling was straightforward. Assets diverted would be returned. Compensation ordered. Debts assigned. Responsibility placed exactly where it belonged. I walked out of the courthouse, alone this time. The steps felt familiar, but the weight in my chest was gone. Outside, the sky was clear. I pulled my coat tighter, not because I was cold, but because it felt like closure. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. It became honest. I worked. I paid bills. I learned to rest without guilt. I laughed more easily. I slept without bracing myself for conflict. I stopped checking my phone compulsively. At the market, customers noticed the change. "You look lighter," one woman said casually as I rang up her groceries. "I am," I replied. Ash grew lazier, happier, spending afternoons in sunlit patches on the floor. The apartment felt like mine for the first time, not a shared space filled with compromise, but a home shaped by peace. Months passed. The noise faded. Then, one evening, Zuri called me unexpectedly. "You sitting down?" she asked. "I am now." She exhaled. "He's moved into a basement unit outside the city. No car. No business. Living off cash jobs. His families turned on each other." I closed my eyes briefly. Not out of satisfaction. Out of acceptance. "And her?" I asked. "She left," Zuri said. "No wedding. No ring. No fairy tale. I nodded slowly. Figures. Do you feel bad? She asked gently. I considered the question carefully. No, I said. I feel done. One quiet evening, as I was closing the market, the owner handed me a set of keys. I trust you, she said simply. I want you to manage the place fully. I stared at the keys, stunned. You've already been doing it, she added with a smile. This just makes it official. That night, I cooked a proper meal for the first time in weeks. I lit a candle. I ate slowly. I played music I liked, not background noise to drown out tension, but something to enjoy. Ash jumped onto the table, unapologetic. Hey! I laughed, gently nudging him. No dramatic gestures. He ignored me completely. I leaned back in my chair and thought about the woman I used to be, the one who endured, excused, waited, and hoped things would somehow change without confrontation. That woman had believed silence was strength. I knew better now. Strength was preparation. Strength was patience with a purpose. Strength was knowing when to speak and when to walk away. And most of all, strength was choosing myself without apology. The world didn't end when I stopped protecting him. It began, and for the first time in a very long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The silence after everything settled was louder than the chaos that came before it. For years, my life had been shaped by reaction, anticipating moods, smoothing conflicts, preparing explanations before questions were even asked. Now, there was nothing to brace for. No doors slamming. No phones buzzing with demands. No voices reminding me of what I owed. Just quiet. At first, it felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious. I kept waiting for the next shoe to drop, for some last attempt to pull me back into the wreckage. But days passed, then weeks, and nothing came. Instead, something else did. Clarity. I started noticing details I had ignored for decades. How the morning light hit the kitchen counter. How my shoulders didn't tense when keys turned in a lock. How decisions, small ones like what to cook or when to sleep, felt simple instead of loaded. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. The court process continued in the background, steady and methodical. Every update from my lawyer was procedural, unemotional, exactly how justice should be. No theatrics, no shouting, just numbers, documents, and outcomes. Assets were liquidated. Funds were recovered. Debts were assigned. Each step stripped away another illusion he had built his life on. One afternoon, my lawyer called with a tone I hadn't heard before. Not professional distance, but finality. This chapter is closing, he said. There's nothing left for him to contest. I thanked him and hung up, staring at my reflection in the dark screen of my phone. I looked different. Not younger. Not older. Just more myself. Word still traveled, of course. In small communities, stories never disappear. They just change shape as they pass from mouth to mouth. Some people said I was ruthless. Others said I was cold. A few whispered that I had planned everything long before the divorce. The truth was simpler. I had planned nothing until I was forced to. And when I did, I planned well. One evening, as I was closing the market, a woman I barely knew lingered by the counter. She was around my age, eyes tired, hands twisting the strap of her bag. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course." She hesitated. "How did you do it? Walk away, I mean. After so long." I thought for a moment. "I didn't walk away," I said honestly. I stepped forward. Out of fear. Out of guilt. Out of silence. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, as if I had handed her something fragile and important. That moment stayed with me long after she left. At home, Ash had developed a new routine. He waited by the door every evening, tail flicking impatiently, then followed me from room to room like a silent guardian. Sometimes I talked to him out loud, not because I needed answers, but because I finally had space to hear my own voice. "You know," I told him one night while washing dishes, "we're doing okay." He responded by knocking a spoon off the counter. Fair enough. I started rearranging the apartment, not because anything was wrong with it, but because I wanted it to reflect who I was now. I moved furniture, gave away things that held memories I didn't want anymore, replaced heavy curtains with lighter ones. Each change felt symbolic. I wasn't erasing the past. I was making room for the future. Then came the call I hadn't expected. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Normally I wouldn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Breathing. Hesitation. It's me. I knew the voice instantly. I didn't hang up, not because I wanted to hear him, but because I wanted to hear myself. What do you want? I asked calmly. Silence again. I just wanted to say, I didn't think it would end like this. I almost laughed. You mean you didn't think your actions would have consequences? That's not what I meant, he snapped, then softened his tone. I mean, we had history. Yes, I said. And you spent it. He inhaled sharply. You didn't have to destroy everything. I leaned against the counter, staring at the wall where a picture frame used to hang. I didn't destroy anything, I said. I stopped maintaining a lie. Big difference. You could have handled it privately. I tried, I replied. For 20 years. Another pause. I'm not asking for money, he said quickly, or help. I just wanted you to know I'm not doing well. I closed my eyes briefly, not in pain, but in recognition of something old and familiar. Manipulation dressed as vulnerability. I know, I said, and I hope you figure it out. That's it, he asked bitterly. After everything. Yes, I said, that's it. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I felt complete. Weeks later, I received confirmation that the final transfers had been completed. The money returned to me wasn't just financial restitution. It was validation. Proof that I hadn't imagined the theft, the betrayal, the imbalance. I used part of it to secure my future. Paid off lingering expenses. Set aside savings I had never been allowed to prioritize before. And then, for the first time in my adult life, I did something purely for myself. I booked a short trip. Nothing extravagant. Just a quiet place by the water. No itinerary. No obligations. No one to impress. Zuri insisted on driving me to the station. Text me when you arrive, she said, hugging me tightly. And don't answer calls from anyone whose name starts with a bad memory. I laughed. Deal. The train ride was peaceful. I watched the landscape change, feeling lighter with every mile. When I arrived, the air smelled like salt and possibility. I spent my days walking, reading, sleeping late. I ate when I was hungry, rested when I was tired, thought when I wanted to, and didn't when I didn't. One evening, as I sat by the water watching the sun sink into the horizon, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at them. Not even at myself. Anger had served its purpose. It had pushed me to act, to protect, to reclaim. But now it was done. What remained was peace. When I returned home, the apartment welcomed me like an old friend. Ash scolded me loudly for leaving, then forgave me immediately. Life resumed, not as a burden, but as a rhythm. Work. Friends. Quiet nights. Occasional laughter that caught me by surprise. And then, one afternoon as I was closing the market, someone waited near the door. Not him. Not anyone from the past. Just someone new. He smiled politely, held the door open, made a harmless comment about the weather. Nothing dramatic. Nothing intrusive. I noticed how easy it felt to respond. No defenses. No calculations. Just presence. I didn't know what that moment would become, or if it would become anything at all. But for the first time, the idea of possibility didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned. As I locked up and walked home, keys warm in my hand, I understood something I hadn't before. The greatest victory wasn't watching his life fall apart. It was realizing mine no longer revolved around it, and that, more than any courtroom decision or public exposure, was true freedom. The days that followed didn't arrive with drama or announcements. They came quietly, one after another, like gentle proof that life didn't need explosions to move forward. I returned fully to routine, not the old routine built around obligation and endurance, but a new one shaped by intention. Morning started earlier now, not because someone demanded it, but because I wanted the calm before the world woke up. I brewed coffee slowly, standing by the window, watching the street come alive. Ash always sat nearby, tail flicking, as if standing guard over this new version of me. Work at the market deepened into something meaningful. Customers stopped being faces and became stories. The elderly man who came every Tuesday for apples and stayed to talk about his late wife. The single mother who asked me which vegetables lasted longest because money was tight that week. The young couple arguing quietly over what to cook, still in that fragile stage of learning how to coexist. I listened more than I spoke, and when I did speak, I spoke honestly. One afternoon, Zuri stopped by unannounced, leaning against the counter with that familiar grin. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel lighter," I replied. She studied me for a moment. "You know, not everyone comes out the other side like this." "I didn't come out," I said. "I rebuilt." That was the truth. I wasn't returning to anything. I was constructing something new from the ground up, piece by piece with intention. The legal matters faded into the background as final confirmations arrived. Accounts closed. Titles transferred. Obligations severed. Each document felt less like paperwork and more like a door, quietly locking behind me. No applause. No celebration. Just closure. And then came the unexpected wave. Not from him. From myself. One night, long after the city had gone quiet, I found myself awake on the couch, staring at nothing. Ash slept curled beside me. The room was still. And suddenly, without warning, grief hit me. Not sharp, not explosive, but heavy. I cried for the years I had given, for the woman I had been, for the version of love I had believed in. It wasn't regret. It was mourning. I let it happen. I didn't fight it. I didn't shame myself for it. I cried until my chest loosened and my breath steadied again. When it passed, it left something behind. Not emptiness, but understanding. I had loved deeply. That was not a flaw. The flaw was staying where love was not returned with respect. After that night, something shifted permanently. I no longer questioned my decisions in quiet moments. The doubts stopped knocking. Weeks later, I ran into someone from the past at the market, an old acquaintance, someone who had known us both. She hesitated when she saw me, eyes flicking with curiosity barely disguised. "I heard things," she said carefully. I smiled politely. "People usually do." She nodded. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know about how bad it was." "Most people didn't," I replied. She hesitated again. "If you don't mind me asking, do you hate him?" I considered the question longer than she probably expected. "No," I said finally. "I don't carry him with me anymore." That seemed to surprise her more than anger would have. And that's when I understood something else. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't need witnesses. It simply exists. Time passed. Seasons shifted. The market changed displays. My life settled into something steady and whole. I began taking small risks, trying new recipes, signing up for a short course I'd always postponed, saying yes to invitations without overthinking them. One evening, after closing, I lingered longer than usual, rearranging shelves that didn't really need rearranging. Outside, the streetlights glowed warm against the dusk. That's when I noticed him again, the man from weeks earlier. He stood near the entrance, pretending to study a display while clearly waiting. "Are you going to keep reorganizing the same shelf?" he asked gently. "Or can I finally say hello?" I laughed before I could stop myself. It felt easy. "Hello," I said. He introduced himself. Nothing dramatic. No heavy backstory. just a normal conversation that flowed without effort. He didn't pry, didn't ask questions that carried weight. He listened. When he finally asked if I'd like to grab coffee sometime, it didn't feel like pressure or expectation. It felt optional, and that made all the difference. "I'd like that," I said. Walking home later, I didn't replay the interaction obsessively. I didn't analyze his words or imagine outcomes. I simply let the moment be what it was, a possibility, not a promise. At home, Ash greeted me with disapproval for being late, then forgave me immediately. "You'll survive," I told him. "I promise." That night I slept deeply. No dreams of the past. No anxiety about the future. Just rest. Days turned into months. The coffee turned into conversations. The conversations turned into familiarity. Not dependency. Not urgency. Balance. He never tried to fill a void, because there wasn't one anymore. I had already filled it myself. And somewhere in the quiet rhythm of rebuilding, I realized the final truth of everything I had endured. What broke me didn't define me. What I rebuilt did. I didn't win because someone else lost. I won because I chose myself, fully, finally, without apology. And from that choice, everything else followed. If my story reminded you that silence doesn't mean weakness and choosing yourself is never wrong, take a moment to support it. Tap follow, share where you're watching from in the comments, and pass the story along to someone who might need the same reminder. Your support helps these real-life stories reach the people who need them most.